I want to welcome everyone to the first ever Auntie Leader Circle webinar. It's great to have leaders joining us from all across Europe, and I'm beyond happy sharing that we have 1,600 listeners signed up for this webinar today. My name is Imma Salonen, and I'm the CEO of Auntie. At Auntie, we build more sustainable working life and successful companies by empowering employees to take care of their mental well-being. So in other words, we turn mental well-being into business impact. Currently, we work with hundreds of organizations and hundreds of thousands of employees on these topics. And people turn to us when everyday stress, motivation problems, other challenges in work life, constant change, or private life challenges turn into something that start to burden you. So we provide you with low threshold professional support that helps the individuals and companies to strengthen resilience, reduce absences, and boost performance. Today, aligned with our mission on building more sustainable working life, we have started this community for leaders where we create space to learn, share ideas, and reflect on what it really takes to combine performance and care for people. As most of you know, employee mental well-being, it has moved far from HR's desk where it used to sit. Today, it's firmly on the agenda of every CEO, management team, leader, board, or even owners. But why is that? Based on our learnings, it's evident that the underlying reason for this is the fact that the data is clear. We now understand how employee mental well-being correlates with things like growth, productivity, and so on. So it is equivalent to companies' future readiness. Organizations that have strong well-being cultures, they report 20 to 30% higher productivity. They save millions in sick leaves, and they also retain best talent longer. And with this, build sustainable employer brands. And this is exactly why today's conversation matters. Because sustainable leadership, it's not only about avoiding burnout, it's about building skills and culture that help teams to thrive. So organizations can navigate this change with better resilience. And to help us reflect on this today, we are privileged to have with us Professor Alf Rehn, an internationally recognized business thinker, together with our moderator, Per-Egill Frostmann. And they'll challenge us to rethink leadership and performance in today's context of working life. So with that, thank you again for joining, and let's get started.
So thank you, Immo, for those good words. My name is Per-Egill Frostmann. I'm an executive coach, a mentor, lecturer in organizational psychology at BI, Norwegian School of Management. I would like to start with a couple of comments on what I believe is our common predicament right now. Peter Drucker, the famous leadership writer and management thinker, once said that the greatest fear in times of turmoil is not turmoil itself, but acting with yesterday's logic. Okay, so following Drucker, we have used to have a trendy managerial and leadership acronym, VUCA. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. As a coach to senior leaders, I've noticed that it has been easy to use VUCA as a crutch, a way to throw off the hard work of strategy and planning. After all, The saying goes that you can't plan for a weaker world. Okay? Now, since 2020, futurist Jamais Kosiko came up with a new scenario, or maybe another crutch, for world development. It's called BARNI. This is also an acronym, tries to capture how the world looks today. It is supposedly brittle, anxious, nonlinear, and incomprehensible. I'm not sure if all that is true, at least not at the same time. With any number of wars raging, US customs tariffs on a roller coaster, and the world's top leaders growing more and more authoritarian by the day, it certainly looks balmy. Now, turning to you, Professor Rehn, what does your research reveal about how leaders can build genuine resilience in their teams, in their organizations, and not least with themselves when the next disruption is always around the corner? The microphone is yours.
Thank you very much, Per-Egill, and thank you for having me. It's delightful to be here at this Auntie seminar, and hopefully even my slides are now visible so that we can kind of go into this more keynote-y part of this. My name, as stated, is Alf Rehn. And I am, as a professor, I am often brittle and incomprehensible, but I will try to become slightly more comprehensible during this. I often, to those of you who don't know me, I work as a professor of innovation, design and management at the University of Southern Denmark, where I particularly study executives, innovation, and AI. But I also work with strategic advisory, and a lot of what I'm talking about today will connect to work I've done with top managers, top executives in European corporations primarily, but also with a bit of a global aspect. So to start, I wanted to call this talk Humane Leadership in Inhumane Times, with a bit of a question mark, because as Per-Egill so elegantly kind of put it to us, it can seem a bit inhumane out there right now. And the question for me is, of course, what does the human aspect of all this, what's left of it, and how can we develop that? And this might sound like a very kind of odd place to start, but I would want to, during this 40-ish minutes I'm going to talk, I want to kind of make people think a little bit about what they believe human stands for and what they believe humane stands for. Because as Per-Egill also intimated, we live in a time of very rapid disruption, very rapid development, and the issue of the human is actually coming a bit under strain and being challenged by technology, but also by the ways in which we organize, lead, and manage. I'm going to talk broadly under 4 themes because I like a well-structured talk. I'm going to start by speaking exactly to what Per-Egill already intimated, that is leadership in challenging times. What are the true challenges and what might be the pitfalls we're not really aware of, but still existent very much in this day and age. I'll take this further and kind of challenge a bit more with the notions of what I've called algorithmic leadership and even algorganizations, a neologism that just amuses me a bit, so I like bringing it out. That is questioning what have the latest technological developments done to our understanding of the humane in organization? And then to the actual meat of the talk, what is to be done? What is it that this time demands of us? And what are the kinds of resilient structures we need to develop to actually manage in this brittle and sometimes incomprehensible age? And end this by naming a few things I believe will be important to have a sustainable path forwards, not as a recipe, not as an absolute, but as an opening up for the Leader Circle's broader conversation about what does it mean to reach for true leadership excellence in these troubled times. I hope this is okay for everyone, because it's all the entire presentation, and I'm not able to redo this at this moment, so this is what we're going to go with. And I'm going to start with a few fairly theoretical, even meta references or commentaries, because I believe it's important to know what the problem is before you start solving it. And an issue that I often come across, and I believe we all come across, is the question of how permanent is leadership or management, or for that matter, organization really? Is it this ever-changing, constantly mutating thing where we never really can trust or plan for anything, the VUCA Per-Egill referred to? Or is there something eternal, something constant to how we organize, to how we lead? And of course, the answer is both and. There are ever-changing things and there are permanent things. But what we tend to forget is just how stubborn we humans are, and how keen we are to stick to the kinds of structures once we've established them, how slow our institutions truly are to move. I sometimes use email as an example of this. I tend to ask audiences whether they know how old email is. And people guess, oh, it's like 30 years old, or it's like maybe 35. And then I remind them that email has a very specific age. It is the exact same age as I do. I am the exact age of modern email. I'm 53 years old. I'm born in March 1972, which is the very month when we for the first time sent one email from one server to another. 53 years we've had email, this not always beloved technology. And as I always say, to some smirks from the audience, and yet in these 53 years, we've never learned that copy all is a bad idea. And I say this partly, of course, as a joke, but also partly as a reminder of just how slow change is. During the pandemic, we were told that now organizations would change in almost incomprehensible ways. Work from home would become the only way of working, and we would get rid of all those terrible, terrible meetings that plagued our lives. What happened? We got more meetings than ever before, because Teams made it possible to pull people together with greater efficiencies, and all the promises of less meetings, more direct engagement, less of this institutional chaff were broken. All the promises were for naught. We found ourselves back in the same old of Monday meetings and a continuous immense amount of invites to more and more pointless gatherings. So in a sense, the more things change, the more they say the same. But the important thing here is not to kind of have examples of this, but to wonder why. What is it that makes change so very difficult? And what is it in these things we call our organizations that creates this slowness? And I claim, and a lot of the research I do points exactly in this direction, is because we have lost track of the human element. We have built great edifices, tremendous institutions, transcontinental such, spanning time and space, where it is so easy to put together a team, partly in India, partly in Germany, partly in the US, even in little old Finland. And we forget that in this creation of the organization as the greatest machine of wealth creation the world has ever seen, we have lost track of humanity. We have lost track of the human. And this happened in various ways. And to kind of really address what I want to address today, we need to be aware of just the challenges that were brought upon us without us really necessarily even understanding that this was what happened. The first, it was what I've called ignoring humanity. We were taught, including by the Mr. Drucker Per-Egill referenced, that the true way to organize and to manage those organizations was by numbers, by key performance indicators, KPIs, by reducing everything into the measurable, the controllable, that which could be turned into data. The fact that there were humans behind the KPIs, that there were something living and breathing behind all these numbers, no, that didn't matter to us in the beginning, because what gets measured gets done. We started ignoring humanity because we saw the efficiencies in it. And we started doing this early on. This has been going on for about 110 years, right about now, in which we started piece by piece, step by step, ignoring or even replacing humanity in our organizations and the manner in which we talked about it. We started talking about KPIs, about profits and losses, about terms and conditions. And for every one of these steps, humanity became a little less present, a little less living in the organization. This led to a forgetting of humanity not in the forgetting of humans, but in the sense that what defines humanity, its messiness and its diversity, became ever more pushed to the side. I've heard CEOs say the key parts of our value leave the office at the time of 4 or 5 in the evening and drive home, not realizing by making this statement, he was homogenizing the entirety of his staff into not humans, but units of this mass he thought was humanity, but which really was just reduced to a resource. We even have this most hated of terms, human resource management, which doesn't even hide the fact that it treats humans not as humanity, but as resources, as things to be plugged into the machine that is organization. And what does this lead to? Well, it leads to the situation in which we are today, where we increasingly speak, can we fully replace humanity in our organizations? Just like Per-Egill, I work with top executives too, and their number one question tends today to be, how fast can I automate? How many people can I shift away from working in the organization and leave this to the machines instead? And it is natural, because all of the ways in which we organized, all of the ways in which we built our market organizational capitalism has led us to this moment. We started by turning people into numbers. We continued by marginalizing humanity, increasingly seeing it as mere resource. And today we are in the midst of a complex way of understanding leadership, an age I've called human-like resources. And human-like here has a double meaning. It is a foreboding of what I'm going to talk about when I start speaking of AI, which is increasingly human-like, but also the fact that in our strive to create organized, efficient human resource management, we have often ignored the human and instead treated the human like, the averaged human, the homogenized human, the median human. And this makes sense from an efficiency standpoint, but as I hope I'll be able to show, this also means that we are losing track of what truly creates value in these strange things we call humans, in this strange group we call humanity. So, for me, this brittle and partly incomprehensible time defined by the thinking machines is not simply a story of how technology takes over, but a story about the importance to think and rethink humans. What is it that humans actually are good at? What is it that humans actually do? But also of reintroducing humanistics, the sciences of humans, the sciences of how human action can create things in this world, and more than anything, the notion of the humane. The humane as that which stands against reduction, as that stands against the marginalization of all differences, as that stands against automation. And as we go further in here, I want to champion the humane, not just because I believe in it for romantic reasons, but because I believe in championing the humane, we can actually find the true value of how we can create great things, not just now, but also in the future. So what does it mean to be human in an age defined by technology? That, to me, is one of the key questions, and also something where now Per-Egill probably would like to come in and challenge me a bit on.
Yes, thank you, Alf. I enjoyed that, really. Bringing me back to Florence in the 14th century, as you did in your last comments over the past few minutes. I have a question for you, I think. If humans have always been treated as human-like resources, this management concept, rather than just humans, what makes this age different? Or are you suggesting that we just stopped lying about these issues?
In a very real way, I believe in slow cycles. We're always being told that this age is the most dynamic of all, that there's never been as much change as there is right now. We're being told these very romantic, almost science fiction-like stories about how everything we are experiencing now is so unique. I do not believe it to be so. I believe, for instance, that the discussion of AI and automation in organizations, that I will move on to, is just a continuance of a very long conversation we've had, a very long move away from a true acknowledgement of humanity, and that it is within our institutions and our organizations has long existed this anti-humanistic principle. So, to me, it's not some kind of radical new thing I'm talking about, but rather how it might be that in this specific age and with these new specific technologies, we might finally have a moment to truly challenge this discourse and show new possibilities for the human, not the 14th century human, not the 18th century human, but a true 21st century one.
Thank you, Alf. You also mentioned in one of your slides, ignoring, forgetting, and replacing humanity.
Mm-hmm.
Which of these three is the most dangerous, do you think? And which are leaders most guilty of right now?
I think the most dispiriting one is the tendency of ignoring humanity, which we have carried with us for the last few hundred years. I see on history as a long path, and we thought that we had already seen the end of the terrible ignoring and forgetting of humanity that we saw during, for instance, the Second World War. But we are currently seeing in much of our world that the same principles, the same dehumanization are coming back. However, I do believe our leaders have become better. I do believe that many leaders in organizations are better, but they might not be fully aware that by their strive to automate everything that can be automated, they may actually be part and parcel of a bigger move, a more, let's say, thorough shift in history. And that this, therefore, is a time for all of us to truly start speaking about humanity and the human again.
I sense that you are asking us if leadership also, or the leadership truths that we hold across generations. But what if the real question is, have we ever led humanely, or have we just gotten better at pretending at it? What do you think?
I will come back to that one later, I think, because I do think we have always had that spark of humanity in us.
Yeah.
And I do believe that reaching in for that might exactly be what's required here and now. And that is a perfect lead in to what I wanted to talk about next, namely this notion of algorithmic leadership and algorganizations. A bit of a mouthful, but one that we need to address. So, another question that we get right now, I'm sure both you and I, Per-Egill, is, so what's going to happen? Are we going to get a ton of AIs as leaders and managers and colleagues? We speak of agentic AI that's going to be our workhorses, and of algorithmic leadership that's going to take over our middle management positions. And it is an interesting question, but to me, it's not the right question. To me, it's a question that only intimates at the right question, which is more, what are human beings actually good at? And what is AI actually good at? And now, let's be frank. We all know how we're trained to answer this because we've had a little bit of time. We're trained to say things like, well, human beings are good at creativity and good at soft skills and emotional intelligence and all these wonderful things we like to kind of think that we humans are good at. Now, I've worked with creativity my entire professional life, and let me tell you something. Human beings are not by heart great at creativity. Quite the opposite. We can force ourselves to become creative. We can push ourselves into creative spaces. But, truth be told, most people can generate a couple of creative ideas and then they're done for the day, where a machine can just keep churning. We speak of these soft skills as if it was a given that we humans are so terribly good at them. Whereas a lot of the research that we're seeing coming out right now is actually intimating that things might already be way stranger than we think. There's a string of research out there, for instance, about machines and empathy. Empathy being, of course, something we always kind of consider that we humans are born for and naturals at. Just as an example, a group at my university had done a tremendous study regarding chatbots for patients at the new university we're building. We're building a new university hospital, and as part of this, people, of course, wanted AI to be integrated into this. So we did an experiment, or my colleagues did at least, in which doctors were given charts of patients. But at the same time, an AI was given all the same charts, and in addition, every medical manual written by man. They force-fed medical manuals into this AI, so it became one of the best knowledgeable medical AIs in the world. And then they did something very curious. They asked patients' relatives to contact, through a chatbot interface, either a doctor or this AI, not knowing which one they were talking to. So they for instance, might have had a child or a parent who'd had an operation and now needed to know how to care for them back at home. And something strange happened in this, and studies after this have shown the same tendency over and over again. Number one, when it came to strict medical knowledge, humans beat the machines almost every single time. This goes against what we're taught about the machines, in which we're taught that the machines can see things we cannot and understand things we are unable to comprehend. But in this case, in almost every case, the medical professionals, the humans, could give better factual advice than the AIs. Why? Because those charts contained a lot of abbreviated information that doctors could read and could parse and could understand, where they could read between the lines and give far better recommendations than the AI could, which lacked that kind of experience, that having done that. And that sounds great. Point one for humans. However, this wasn't the only thing that these chatbots were graded on. On grades such as empathy and being humane, the chatbots, the AIs, won 85% of the time. 85% of the cases, the patient's relatives thought that the AI was more human than the humans were. And in almost every case, something like 97%, they thought the AI was more empathetic. This goes against everything we've been told about AIs and humans. But it was actually fairly easy to understand why this was. Now, Per-Egill, for instance, is a man of infinite patience and empathy, but I am not. I work with students, and when I work with 3 students a day, my empathy battery is almost zero. I become cross and cranky and not at all very nice to work with. Because very few of us have infinite patience and infinite empathy. Machines can at least mimic this till the cows proverbially come home. What these doctors heard when the patients asked for a third time, shall I use this salve? How much should I feed them chicken soup? And so on. The doctors got annoyed. The doctors started answering curtly. The doctors even hung up on patients when they would ask the same question too often. Not the chatbots. The chatbots, with their endless memory and their complete lack of comprehension of time, could keep chatting, keep supporting, keep being sympathetic, never saying a cross word. That is, in this very specific case, and it is not a singular case, there have been many other studies that say the same thing, AIs were actually felt more human, more emotionally present, more kind, more listening than humans could ever be. And this is why we need to have a debate about the human versus the human-like. Because when I say human-like resources, I of course referred also to AIs. AIs are human-like. This is why so many people now are falling in love with chatbots. This is why we have lots and lots of people, a scary amount of people, frankly, who are using AIs for therapeutic reasons rather than going to actual professionals. This is why we have people who literally want to marry what they believe is their true love, which actually is a chatbot. Because the human-like in AIs is actually rather magical. It will never contradict you. It will always say what you want to hear, and its patience, as pointed out, is endless. We humans aren't like that. We get grumpy. We run out of patience. We start kind of biting back. We are a far more complex creation than we present ourselves to be. And this raises the question, well, Should we just then let everything over to the machine, since even those soft sides they can do better, even those creative things they can push out in greater quantities? But here I believe it is important to acknowledge what is still grand with humanity and what is the problem, particularly with generative AI. I have always pointed to the fact that generative AI is a mediocrity engine. It is an incredibly smart algorithm for crunching existing data and giving median answers regarding it. I have sometimes, in a more philosophical flourish, called it avatars of the anodyne. That is, it can give you a perfectly okay, good enough recipe, a perfectly good, okay mimic of the latest Dan Brown book, a perfectly okay, average joke. However, the tendency of AI to aim for the average, the good enough, the anodyne, is exactly what is creating a lot of our problems in our organizations right now. I will start with the notion of the missing outliers. I work in universities, and I can tell you something has happened in our universities. I no longer get truly shit submissions. I used to get those terrible exams clearly written by a severely hungover person in the last hour before the deadline. And they were never good, but they were amusing, and they were somehow very human, these truly terrible assignments. They've gone. They've all disappeared, replaced by sloppy but somewhat mediocre essays, replaced by something that's passable but not very excellent. It's been replaced by the lower part of average. The scary bit is that the excellent papers have disappeared as well. I no longer get the idiosyncratic, weird, strange, truly great submissions. I haven't seen a truly great exam paper for about 5 years now. They used to be there. They weren't common, but they used to come. Now they too have disappeared, and everything is going towards the average, the median, the anodyne. And just a few days back, Harvard Business Review ran a very important article on work slop, on what happens in organizations when people no longer even try to make good work because they know that generative AI can create the good enough, that which lives up to the KPIs, that which is good enough because it does what was measured. But what happens when, let's pretend for a moment, Per-Egill and I work in the same organization? I'm not sure that any organization could handle that amount of beard, but let us pretend. And I start sending work slop, clearly AI-generated reports to Per-Egill. What happens in Per-Egill's mind? First, he will be actually slightly annoyed. My God, is this all Alf can produce? After a while, he'll start feeling disrespected. He will realize Alf doesn't care enough about our collaboration, about me, so he just sends me this slop, this mediocre nonsense. So what does Per-Egill start to do? Well, if he's a good man, he will come to me and take a strong grasp of my lapels and shake me until I start doing better. But a slightly weaker man will go, well, if this is what goes, he will too start producing work slop. He too will not care about creating something that actually sounds like him or has any kind of level, any kind of standard. He will too start creating work slop. And at that point, our organizations become toxic. At that point, when we allow for that last bit of where we could show our humanity, our work, when that becomes taken over by these avatars of the anodyne, we're close to something very, very dangerous. And that is why, to me, the big question right now is not, oh, what should AIs do, or even what's a human? But are we leading and organizing for just the good enough? Or are we trying to capture that which humans still can do, which humans still can push for, namely excellence? Yes, excellence. Machines are not good at excellence. Organizations are not great at excellence, but humans can be. Humans have within them the capacity to create great things, to realize when something is just mediocre slop, and to recognize when somebody's doing truly great work. We even know in ourselves when we're doing our very best work. You see, machines don't care. A lot of managers don't care. But we can be the people who care, the people who care enough to say good enough is no longer good enough. If we want to, in the true title of this webinar, find the sustainable leadership, find that driving result, we need to rethink excellence. We need to rethink the manner in which we humans can actually transcend ourselves. When we can decide not just to allow for work slop or the good enough or the close enough for rock and roll, but instead start talking seriously about what does excellence, not excellence as efficiency, not excellence as forced by some form of mechanistic fixture, but true human excellence. What does it mean in your work? What does it mean in your team? For let me tell you, the reason people are stressed out is not because we demand too much excellence of them. It's because we stress them to death for doing more and more of that work slop. We stress them to death by putting our demands about production in numbers and measurements rather than asking humans, what would your best, most excellent work look like? And what can this place do to make that excellence flourish? Or what do you think, Per-Egill?
I actually think that this is nearly scary, Alf. So I need to ask you this question.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, you call generative AI mediocrity engines.
Mm-hmm.
But isn't most human, this is probably a bit provocative for a few listeners, most human leadership already mediocre? What if AI isn't lowering the bar, but it is just revealing what it actually is?
Mm-hmm. I think that you're absolutely correct. And I think, in a sense, we can be scared. But at the same time, this is where we can actually change the discussion. Way back when Karl Marx pointed out that what's happening in our organization is alienation. We were alienated from the true work that we did because it was turned into just KPIs or fragmented little tasks. And he points out, and this is Karl Marx, not one known for his kind of efficiency logics or management insights. He kind of points out that the artisan, the person taking ownership of their own work, of actually wanting to create the best shoe they could, they are, in a sense, by nature excellent. When we are allowed to do our right work, our best work, we normally do a real good job of it. And you're absolutely right. Management has pushed on us towards mediocrity with its KPIs, with its calculative rationality, with all that. But we do no longer need to be captured in that. Let those managers be replaced by AIs because they have shown by their actions that they are not really bringing true value, true excellence. And let those who are prepared to actually work in a way that shows our humanity as its best, give them the time, give them the resources to actually do what they can do in their flourishing selves.
So, if I may try and sum up this chapter, I really want to know, because you said creativity, not so good. Emotional competence, not so good when it comes to it. What actually are we good at beyond comforting ourselves that we are special?
I believe that we have tremendous powers. I believe that we are not the most creative if creativity is measured by ideas per second. A machine will always beat us there. But we are the greatest daydreamers there ever was. We are the only ones who can create true visions. We're the only ones who can truly muster pure critique, not critique in a toxic sense, but a critique that can make somebody really kind of aim for a higher purpose, a higher self. You work a lot with the CEOs. I know, Per-Egill, you work as an executive coach, and I do similar kinds of work. And you know that a lot of our work is not to force people to do anything, but ask, if you could do whatever, what could you achieve? If you were afraid of anyone, not the markets, not your board, not your partner, what are the grand things you truly could achieve? This part of humanity is what I'm trying to go for here. And I will show you in this part what is to be done, what I believe we can do to really get there. To me, the question is slightly wrongly posed, but it's an important one anyway. How can we prepare for the coming changes? Well, we need to prepare. We need to have a dialogue about what are humans good at, what's humanity good for, and what are machines good at. But we also need what I would call a counter-reductionist reformation. And the slightly theological language here is not by chance. That is, we need to go against those who would turn us into mere human-like resources and recapture the human. We are something more than the KPIs we produced. We are something more than the figures that we can sign off on. We are actually engines of excellence if we're allowed to be. And here, I believe that it's important to discuss humanity slightly broader than we have. Now, DEI has been criticized as of late. For those of you who haven't paid attention, DEI means diversity, equality, and inclusivity. And there is a trauma against it because some people believe that it is a system that only wants to push for certain people in the organization. I am aggressively against this idea. I believe DEI has been misunderstood and misused, including by DEI specialists. For me, DEI is central because it asks the real question about humanity. That is, what is it broadly understood? The reason we have had this reductionist logic, which then has led us to these mediocrity engines, is because we haven't paid enough attention to the diversity issue. And now, diversity here is not just a question of counting women versus men. It's not a question of looking at skin tones in the company photos. It's something far broader. It has to do with, do we let aged voices have the same power as young voices in our organizations? Are we allowing people from working class background to have the same capacity to get their voices heard as those who come from an upper class background? Our designers listen to where engineers and lawyers are. What is truly great about humanity is not our problem-solving capability. It's not how similar we are. It's not how well we can represent ourselves in an IQ test. It is the plethora of ways of being we represent. It is the manifold that is us. Any study on creativity will tell you what we need is psychological safety so that all voices get heard, but also diversity so that all voices are actually present. That is, we have reduced humans into two categories, the normals and the DEIs. And I am here to say, no, we're all part of DEI. We're all unique, intersectional weirdos, and that is what's wonderful about us. Now look at chatbots. I spend my entire life looking at chatbots, and my God, they're all the same. They're absolutely all the same. Llama is like Grok. Grok is like Claude. Claude is like ChatGPT. And then we go around and around again. Yes, we can throw different wrappers around them. We can tease them and make them do different kinds of tricks in different kinds of voices. But in the end, it's all the same. They're mediocrity engines. They lack the bizarreness, the weirdness that we humans represent. And that is why, if we truly want to talk about how we create these kinds of sustainable organizations where we drive results without burning out the teams, we need to take a step back and talk about cultures of care and civility. That is, cultures where we show respect to each other, where we don't throw work slop into each other's inboxes, where we don't copy all just because we're too goddamn lazy to think about who we want to communicate with, and instead start building cultures where all humans, regarding of their standing, their background, their education, their experience, the skin color, or who they like to sleep with at night, are seen as full humans, where the full gamut of the weirdness of humans is brought in. Because this is something that the machines cannot replicate. But this is also something our institutions aren't built for. Our institutions are built for people from the same backgrounds, going the same career ladder, sitting in the same cubicles. Time and time again, I come in and say to kind of management teams in the Nordics, in Germany, in the UK, even in the US, and say, my God, we're so pale, we might all be dead. Because we have not taken truly the full gamut of humanity into consideration. And here I'm in a sense happy that the AI challenge is upon us. Because this might be what forces us to truly see that no, the average Joe from the average university with the average language and the average way of answering is no longer the center of the universe. That is what can be replaced. The broad, diverse, messy group of people with different perspectives, different experiences, different take on lives, that is what we need to nurture. Those are the ones we need to treat with civility. Those are the ones we need to care for. For in that diverse mess lies the path towards true excellence. And it's of course here where mental well-being is a key strategic question. Because to do this, to really capture what is sometimes referred to as the cognitive surplus, the true kind of cognitive power of our organization, we need to kind of say, no, everyone's is important, and it's the diversity and everyone's mental well-being is what will be the driver of value. Because if we only go with the average, if we only go with the average mind, the average neurons, the neuronormal, if you will, well, then we will not have that which will enable a competitive advantage. Instead, we need to start see mental well-being united with diversity to create the next true engine of value creation, that driver of excellence where people coming together in a space where they feel that they can truly flourish, start driving each other upwards. And it's here the humane becomes our competitive advantage. Not human, because I thought that word was too reductionistic, but the humane. That which takes all of us in our messiness, in our complexity, in our strangeness, and realize that in this mess lies all that is excellent, all that can drive us further. Burnout comes from a mechanistic view of this, of trying to mill this for efficiency. A sustainable leadership of this emphasizes care and respect and civility, saying that it is from this that true excellence is born. But how do you optimize for the humane? Can you even optimize for the humane? Should you even optimize for humane? These are the new strategic questions. Do we need, for instance, to talk about neuronormality as a problem? That is, we're talking now about neurodiversity might be a way to bring in a little weirdness. Maybe the problem is us normies, us normals, us dull middle-aged men, pretending sometimes to be slightly interesting. Maybe optimizing for the humane means that people like I, bearded, middle-aged man from the middle class in my kind of linen jacket, maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I'm what's not needed in this new age of excellence.
So, Alf, I enjoyed that. So, mental being, well-being is a key strategic question, you say. I agree.
Mm-hmm.
But when you say making the humane a competitive advantage, aren't you commodifying humanity again? Just a nicer language? And if mental well-being is strategic, who gets fired when it fails? Who's responsible?
There is always the lurking danger of reductionism. And we always run this risk of kind of turning these things not into the kind of dialogic, philosophical kind of engagement they should be, and instead into cheap parlor tricks. It's, for me, it's not about saying this is the recipe, this is the easy trick. It is to change the conversation. It's to change the conversation away from the easy solutions. Now, Ruggero, for instance, asked in the questions, the algo organizations, didn't even understand really what I meant here. And here I was kind of trying to imply that if we create organizations that are fully driven by algorithms, fully driven by this kind of mediocrity engine logic, those will not have in them even the capacity to bring on this human excellence. They will become mere appendages to the technology. And that there's a danger that we're going towards that. And there are many CEOs right now who are like Heli kind of pointing, just wanting to say, oh, let's automate everything. We can just feed everything into the AIs and the algorithms and be done with it. But that is specifically the wrong thing to do in this day and age. In this day and age, we need to kind of realize that is where the tradition is taking us. That is where the logics are taking us, and we need to resist we need to say no. Good enough is no longer good enough. The fully algorithm-driven organization is not perfect efficiency. It is a denial of excellence. But yes, but you're right. There is a need to also acknowledge this dynamic, and that's why I kind of teased with this optimization for the humane. And I'm with you. We should maybe be careful about not trying to drive this into optimization logics. And mental well-being, who should be fired if it backfires? The CEO. I always like firing CEOs when things get tough. At least they get paid to kind of deal with everything and the really big questions. So a little bit of accountability there is, for me, just kind of fair. But let me do that.
I really enjoyed this tit for tat, but okay. I'm also conscious of the time,
and that's why I'm going to rush through.
I'd like to carry this one on afterwards.
Yes,
because this is really good. We need to move.
And I will. A few words on a sustainable path onwards. We need to prepare for the next level of sustainable human organizing. Everything I've said here is about that. It is about really understanding the new technologies and realizing AIs aren't magic. They are mediocrity engines. They are creators of the average. And we need to understand that we need to pay more attention to humans and their flourishing, including their mental well-being. Here, we need to realize also that AI is not finished. Some people say AI may be coming into a winter phase. That is, that it's not developing as quickly as possible. Others are saying that AI in the future will be a normal technology, just like electricity, not something that we should spend lots of time thinking about. But we need to spend a lot of time thinking about humanity. And we need to start developing a leadership that can handle both the human and the human-like without trying to make these the same. Yes, today we will need to have leaders who can handle the new technologies, that can really kind of handle AI, but we also need leaders who are capable and placed to really raise the standards and therefore also raise the support of the workers. Some have suggested we may actually be moving towards a time in which we cannot just have singular CEOs for corporations, that we need to have co-leaders and co-CEOs, simply because we both need the efficiency driving, more mechanical, more technologically driven, and CEOs who can drive for human flourishing. And that these might not always be the same person, that sometimes we might need a Janus-faced, a double-headed CEO who can handle both of these. And I think that the key will be creating cultures of both care and excellence. We often start to look at these soft and these hard words: results, burnout, care, excellence, as if they were mutually exclusive. As if you can't have a culture that strives for excellence yet still cares for its employees. I believe this is utterly wrong. I worked a lot with cultural organizations, for instance, orchestras, ballet companies, and the likes. In them, there is a tremendous amount of attention paid to making sure that everyone has what they need, that nobody is being put in the corner, nobody's being excluded, that everyone has the tools and the chance to train to truly reach their level of excellence. But there is also a demand that everyone should strive for trying to be the best dancer, the best musician, the best whatever they actually can be. And I believe here we should maybe not look so much towards creativity understood as idea generation or problem solving, but creative work as a model of how we create the next stage of this sustainable leadership. Because in creative work, all of what I have described here comes together. An author will sit down and produce a number of words a day, but they will always come back to those words and try to make them better. And sometimes if you just create one singular perfect sentence in a day, you are thrilled with what you've achieved on that specific day. An artist isn't somebody who just says and daydreams and dreams about paintings to come. It is somebody who allows themselves time to daydream, but then goes and does that hard work with self-criticism and repainting of actually trying to make that great thing appear. In a similar way, I think that our organizations can combine care and excellence, can create space for people to daydream and find their own inner excellence, but still make some demands of actually elevating the workers, elevating their products, elevating what they bring. And I want to end with a bunch of takeaways, and I promise I'll be brief, Per-Egill, and you can comment. The human is not a given. We have these ideas about the human. The human is this, the machine is that. It's not a given. It is something we define, it's something we create. The human like is already here. Machines who can listen better than we can. Machines more patient than us, who seem much more empathetic than we are. They're already here. We have to accept this. And we have to start thinking about what that means in connection to the first point. Excellence needs rethinking. I'm not here to say, oh, we need to run even faster because machines can run so fast. No, we need to bring back what truly is deep in us that can recognize that which is not anodyne, which is not mediocre. Most of us will know instinctively that The Sopranos is a better TV program than Love Island. It doesn't take much to realize this, and we all humans carry it. And we need organizations that are a little bit more like The Sopranos, for all its violence and drug use, and a little bit less like Love Island, which is an awful, awful show. We need focus on the humane, the broad scope of humanity. We need to realize care is no longer optional. It is a necessary part of our organizations. And diversity, true, flourishing diversity, is not a specialization. It's not a political issue. It's everything. It is the complete acceptance and complete bringing in of humane into the organization. Thank you very much.
Alf, you've given us a lot to think about. Now, I want to know something. And I'll try and get an answer from you, or a reply. If you were leading an organization tomorrow, not a university, not a consultancy, but you have 5,000 employees, you need to produce quarterly presentations of your earnings, you have a board breathing down your neck, and that can be pretty hefty, believe you me. What is the first thing of everything you've been going through that you would do differently based on what you've shared with us today?
The first thing I would do is to go down into the organization as low down as I can, to the cleaning staff, to the secretarial pool, to whatever represents it. I used to work on a factory floor and learned more there about how to actually run a company than I ever did in a boardroom. And ask the questions, are you seen? Are you being seen in this organization? Are you being respected? Nothing kills the strive for excellence, the strive to want to create value, the strive to want to do good work, than feeling disrespected. We humans have a fine sense of honor, and it doesn't take much for us to feel that we have been disrespected and therefore completely clock out at the office. And I would institute into this 5,000 person organization a few simple rules. One rule is nobody is ever allowed to yawn at another person's idea. It sounds silly, doesn't it? It sounds weird. Why the hell would yawning be forbidden? Yawning is a microaggression. When somebody brings an idea, they're entitled to things such as questions. They're entitled to things such as responses, about challenges even. A yawn signals your idea is so insignificant, I will not even question it. I will just yawn in your face. I would institute that we all need to speak to each other in kind and civilized and caring ways. The number one thing people actually kind of complain about in organizations that have become toxic is not harassment, it's not being groped by some monstrous boss, it's we just are so unkind towards each other. And the way that's seen mostly is in our language. When I go to a company and see that people speak to each other in a less than civil and unkind way, I know that there's a problem. Because that is the symptom that there is something lacking in the care and the compassion and the civility of it all. So I would start from there, from the little things, because if I've learned something about organizations, and some would question if I have, but if I've learned something about organizations, it's this. It's never the big things. The big things only become big things because the little things have gone wrong. It's always by paying attention to the little things, how people sit in meetings, how people respond when an idea is presented. That's where you see what the actual problems are. And when you solve the little things, when you say that every idea that's being brought into this company needs to be responded to by one serious, good faith question, then you've started to repair that organization. And you start repairing from exactly the reason I've been talking for this last hour now. Because instead of a human bringing an idea and getting an inhuman response, you have humans talking to humans, humans questioning humans, humans entering into a dialogue. And that is something that the machines can't replicate, even though they're very good at mimicking it.
Thank you, Alf. You ended on a word you haven't mentioned before today, humility. Mm-hmm. And it reminds me of Jensen Huang, CEO of NVIDIA, who says that nothing is beneath me. No work in this organization is beneath me. And I actually believe him when he says that. And with those words, I will pass the torch on to Immo, who I think will want to conclude this on behalf of Auntie.
Wow. Thank you, Alf. Thank you, Per-Egill. Thank you for sharing these insights, your ideas. I must say that I've enjoyed every second of it, and also reflecting on the feedback that we are getting over the chat. It seems that sometimes you can please almost everyone, and the feedback has been really, really good throughout. I really hope that everyone tuning in today got something to reflect on, or even take something that you can take into action when you're thinking your own leadership starting tomorrow. We will share the recording with you, and also a small summary on the key findings and ideas discussed here. And we are looking forward to inviting you to the next Auntie Leader Circle webinar, which day will be announced really, really soon. But with that, thank you, Alf. Thank you, Per-Egill. Thank you, everyone online on behalf of whole Team Auntie, and see you at the next Leader Circle.
Thank you.
Thank you, Imo. Thank you, Auntie.
Bye-bye.
Bye for now.